As we sell through thousands of firearms every single year, Rock Island Auction Company sometimes has the tendency to make the extraordinary look ordinary. And that's the case here today. We've got two Miller patent revolving rifles in the building at the same time. But don't let that fool you. These guns are extremely rare, especially first models like this two before me. So both of these rifles before me are J. Miller patent revolving rifles. You can see each one has its own individual differences, but they are both early first model examples. The one here at the back was sold in our August Premier Firearms auction, and the one here in the front is being sold in our December Premier Firearms auction. So it's a really rare opportunity to take a look at two of these guns side by side. We sometimes get that opportunity here at Rock Island because we have so many pieces coming through. We may never even see another J. Miller signed Miller patent revolving rifle anytime soon at all. This example at the front is signed J. Miller Rochester. It is one of only two examples known signed just J. Miller, and the example at the back is signed J&J Miller Rochester, and that's also a rarer version than, say, the later second and third model variations that usually have different signatures on them. So the example in front is signed J. Miller Rochester in script. It's one of only two Miller patent revolving rifles that has a J. Miller Rochester signature. And what's special about this one is that it's also signed in script, whereas I believe the other one was stamped, if I'm remembering correctly here. But what's even more exceptional about this example, this very early first model example, is that this rifle came out of the Miller family and is said to be James Miller's personal revolving rifle. It came out of the family not too long ago. And what's really special is, you might remember from our other video where we covered the back rifle here, that we showed a scan of the original Miller patent. We actually have behind me the original Miller patent. And what's really special about that is, aside from the fact that it's just incredible to have an original patent document and the patentee's gun, it's also the only surviving original copy because the patent office actually burned in 1836. So that copy behind us is the only surviving original copy of the Miller patent. So in our previous video, we showed you some of the mechanical details of how these guns worked. And when you look at these two side by side, you can see some of the evolutionary differences as production continued. We don't actually know whether the Millers produced any of these guns themselves. We do know that a bunch of gun makers worked for them, including Billinghurst, who later became the main manufacturer of these firearms. But each one of them is handmade, and you can see the handmade differences between these two examples before me. Both of them are first models. You can tell that because they have a top strap over top of the cylinder, and they also have a cover that goes over the front of the cylinder. The later examples are not going to have this cover, and they're going to be open on the top. They're not going to have a top strap. Think of like a Colt percussion revolver. Most of them are open on the top strap. That's how the later examples are. They will still have these little catches at the bottom on the later examples, but the front of the cylinder is completely open and the top strap's open. As you might imagine, this front cover could potentially be dangerous if you had a chain fire, which is definitely a problem that happened with early revolving firearms. If this gun was to go off and all of the cylinders were to ignite at once, there's nowhere for the extra gases and the balls to go except for to slam into that plate, which could definitely destroy the gun. You can see both of these examples have small little vents here to let some of that smoke out, potentially maybe vent a little bit of gas, but not anywhere for the balls to escape from. If you take a look at these two examples, both of them are pill locks. All the first models are pill locks. You can see there's little small holes where the priming pills would go. Some of the third model examples, which were made much later, had percussion nipples and used standard percussion caps, and there were some of the earlier examples that got converted to use standard percussion caps, but they were all manufactured as pill locks like this one. And if you look, the cylinder on James Miller's personal gun is completely smooth. These are manually revolved cylinders, but this still would turn relatively easily. But you can imagine if your hands are sweaty or, it makes it harder to get a good grip, that could be a little trickier. You can see on the second example here that they've incorporated some serrations to give you more traction as you're trying to manually revolve that cylinder. So if you take a look at the two guns side by side, you can see a lot of other differences because they are handmade firearms. You can look at Miller's rifle has a much more standard American, Kentucky rifle or half-stock rifle style barrel. It's just an octagon barrel, relatively plain, very traditional sights, whereas this really ornate example at the back has a round barrel with a shaped sighting flat and some engraving. Still pretty traditional sights, but you can see there's a little bit of variation there. These front plates on The front of the cylinders are shaped slightly differently. They're very similar, but they're profiled a little bit different. Again, not the same from gun to gun. If you look at multiple Miller patent firearms, they're all going to be a little bit different. When you get to some of the Billinghurst examples, they're a little more standardized, but these early ones vary quite a bit. If you look at the stocks, they both have crescent butt plates. They both have double cheek pieces with inlays on each side. But on James Miller's rifle, it's a little thicker, a little more robustly built. It's got a nice thick wrist, which, provide a little more strength in that area. While the stocks are a little bit different, you can see that the butt plates, while different materials, are very similar in fashion. The trigger guards, again, very similar. The inlays, you can see, are in the same locations, but they're a little bit different per the different guns. And of course, James Miller's version being an early example, we don't know. Maybe this was the actual first one they had manufactured. Because they're not serialized, because there's no original documentation from the time period to tell us whether or not this was the very first one made, we don't know. But being his personal gun, there's definitely a chance this was the very first one they had made. And one of the things I think is pretty interesting about Miller's rifle is that the engraving on these action components is actually relatively similar to the Collier revolvers, which were the revolving firearms that kind of predate the Miller patent. So one of the cool things about the patent documents being discovered was it shows that the patent was granted in 1829 for a period of 14 years. So the patent would have expired in 1843 unless it was renewed. And it's generally been said that Billinghurst purchased the rights to manufacture firearms under the Miller patent in 1841. We know that James Miller, from Ernie Bates' research, had moved to Michigan prior to that point. And for a long time, people thought that maybe Miller had just died and just never renewed the patent rights, but we actually know he did live until 1849. And the patent covers, in part, this front cover. Originally, they were intended to have a piece of either buckskin or like a sponge in there that would have held oil, that would have helped keep everything lubricated at the front. And probably that would also help keep gas leak contained to some degrees, would have created a tighter seal in there. That was obviously abandoned later, so these two early examples both incorporate that front cap. One of the things that's interesting about the Miller design, when you take a look at it, because they have a solid cap on these first models in front of the cylinder, you cannot load this firearm from the front of the cylinder. You have to load it down the barrel. And that creates a complication in the design of the gun, because you need to carry the ramrod underneath the barrel, but the barrel only comes back this far. And you need the rod to come back at least into the front of the cylinder and still have enough length at the front that you can get a hold of it as you're pushing the ball down the barrel and into the cylinder. And they came up with a really ingenious solution, and they used that on both of these first model rifles. So if you take a look at the one in the front, and you come down here, you take a look at the front of the ramrod, you'll see there's a metal section here. If you unscrew the tip, it comes out. And if you keep unscrewing it, it'll re-screw in place, so the threads go the opposite direction. And that gives you enough extra length to load this gun down the barrel into the cylinder without taking up extra space in the gun. It doesn't have to stick out like this when you're carrying the gun. And you can put it back in, and then now it's nice and compact. So other manufacturers that had to try to solve similar problems came up with solutions that weren't as simple as this, and they would have like a separate component, an extension that would go into the stock that you had to pull out of the stock and attach to the ramrod. This solution keeps things contained, it makes it easier, and you're not going to lose this little section because it's attached to the ramrod permanently. So it's actually a very ingenious solution, and it's kind of interesting that other firearms manufacturers didn't come up with the same solution. Instead, they came up with their own ideas where they had extra components. So I hope you guys enjoyed taking a look at two Miller patent revolving rifles. Both of these are first models, both of them are early examples, and you can see how the design changed a little bit even on these early first models because they were handmade firearms. Each one of these is a beautiful piece of Americana, an excellent collectible, and you can see just the ingenious nature of the Miller patent, which predates Samuel Colt's firearms by several years. You can see how Samuel Colt himself very likely may have been inspired in part by these Miller patent revolving rifles.